Good morning or good evening, whatever time of day it is, and whatever day it is. I want to thank you for listening to another episode of AJH Politics. I want to say that this is episode 11, but I'm Eric Herman, and I am running for Shawnee County District 1 with the Libertarian Party. And in this particular episode, today is 6/18. I want to talk about the village board meeting, I guess, a week ago, which would be, of course, 6/11, I would imagine. Oh, yes. So, most of this meeting was just a public forum about these data centers that they're going to be building, and a lot of public comment, of which most of it was negative. So I'm going to fast forward through a good chunk of this meeting because it was the longest meeting at like, I don't know, 2.5 hours, and just say that it started off talking about some zoning stuff where they had to change a zoning of something with something called a CUP, um, conditional use permit. I'm sorry, CUP. And that basically let this township build a firehouse. So that's basically describing what a CUP is. Then the rest of it was public comment about these data centers. And I got my notes here, by the way, of which some of them have evaporated because they were left in my car. I think it was either so hot or the pen and the paper are magic. But what I tried to do was really come at it from a very neutral, unbiased, uninformed, and open-minded brain. And just try to hear some of the arguments because I will say this: it was mostly negative and it was mostly emotional arguments. And I don't really care about emotional arguments. I care about like facts. Like just present the argument factually. So anyway, one of the pros is they use the word infrastructure to describe it. Now I'm going to talk about whether or not I believe of it as being government infrastructure, and I don't. And I don't because it's not really a monopoly. Like I said, when it comes to roads, and we'll get on that more with today's meeting, when it comes to something like a road, like I said, there's only one way to get a road, but there's from point A to point B. You know, you're not going to build like, here's the three best interstates for you to take to get from town A to town B. You're basically going to be like, no, just build me the one interstate that's the correct one, right? So it's monopolized. Whereas something like seeing a doctor, it's not. Like you can visit all kinds of doctors or learn from all sorts of teachers. So the infrastructure of data centers, is it monopoly prone? I don't understand why there can't be different companies building different data centers. Like a Google data center might be very different from one that is literally legitimately a government data center or a SpaceX data center or whatever. You know, like it's not a monopolized infrastructure because this stuff is it's basically for AI development and cloud computing. That was another pro that I wrote down. Just because these are like technologies that are happening, whether you like it or not. Um, I wrote down government out of business as a pro, which of course is a pro. I don't understand how data centers help get the government out of business. I don't remember what I would write that there. Um, they talked about international competition where they were like, America's got like 800 or something and China's got 200. Like we have enough. We shouldn't build more. Um, it is an argument in the positive, certainly. If someone was going to convince me that data centers were good for like the preservation and longevity of America, I would agree with you on that. I'm just not entirely certain that they are. I mean, China could have 10,000 and we could have 100. I don't necessarily think of, I mean, you have to play to your cards, I guess is what I'm saying. Anyway, let's move on to the cons because there's quite a bit. Okay. So, water consumption, that was a big thing. And that's something that many people talked about was basically environmental issues about water usage and disposal. They did talk about closed systems. That was another pro that kind of came up. A lot of the pros was basically just some of the council members saying a few things. Like there are such things as like where they can kind of store the water in the radiator before they eventually ever dump it. And speaking as someone who works as a civil engineer, like I'm not saying, I want you to understand that it can get clean. Now, do we have the money and the infrastructure to pay for that much water to actually become clean? That's a whole nother question. But this sort of doom and gloom of, oh my gosh, like the water will just turn to death. Like, no, like we know how to treat water. The question is, do we have the money to treat that much water or the infrastructure to do it? Oh, they talked about electrical consumption. They talk about noise pollution, light pollution, these sort of like humming effects and temperature effects. There was a lot of stuff about global warming and golly, that was so silly because here's actually one of the arguments that, sorry, one of the cons, I guess, which is an argument about it that really resonated with me was a Silver Lake um, citizen who kind of talked about how Evergy has been buying up all this good agriculture land and building these solar panels, which if you're still listening, thank you, because episodes ago, they approved another one of those things in Shawnee County, and you had these people, and I ripped on it in one of my earlier episodes. I don't remember which one, about somebody, like it was some people from Douglas County talking about solar. It's perfect, and we all know that it's 100% reliable. And you're like, false statement. There's no such thing as things that are perfect and 100% reliable. Like that's just it's such a lie that how do you expect anyone to take anything serious? They're just basically playing the whole solar clean energy game. And they improve this stuff. And I talked about like, look, I understand that the concept of getting an electrical wire power to your house is kind of a monopoly thing in terms of infrastructure and government involvement in it. The idea is that you could build solar panels like on buildings that already exist and it could become covered parking, and I talked about it's not about whether or not these tax dollars should get spent. It's just like, are they literally spending it on improving the infrastructure or are they doing something else? And anyway, this guy from Silver Lake was saying like, well, they build these, solar panels out in the middle of nowhere. Wouldn't you know, the data center is going to get built right next to it to operate on it. Like that, you wanted clean energy, they'll give you clean energy for data. They talked about moving on. They talked about, well, it wrote down like what resource does it actually provide, this AI clouding? Um, excuse me. Whew. My dog sneezed and then I did. Utility rates going up was another con that they brought up. Maintenance and public. I think this was about just the whole creating jobs argument was just like you get some construction jobs and then what? Like it's who's going to pay for the maintenance and how much maintenance is it going to take? Like, and this was like it was all left wing arguments because I'm like, dude, it creates zero jobs. If you're spending tax dollars on it, that does not create jobs. That just spends other people's money. They could have spent that money on other jobs that they wanted people to be doing, you know? Um, but it was everything was very left leaning, except for that other guy that was, well, I don't know. He was kind of in the whole like data center conspiracy. Like, why do they need to record all this stuff? Here's something that is a huge con, in my opinion, and that is Senate Bill 98. The state passed something that says for the next 20 years, any infrastructure built that is like one of these data center things does not have to pay property taxes. And absolutely, as your commissioner, when you talk about a CUP, which is they were arguing to pass something that added language where any data center would have to get permission from the county in order to build it. And that did end up passing. Let me just, jump to the end there. There was no moratorium, but moving back to the Senate Bill 98. Okay, I talked about this stuff earlier. We talked about with industrial revenue bonds. I am not a big fan of spending money where somebody doesn't have to pay taxes because I don't want anyone to pay taxes. So for me to give out favor of not paying taxes, it doesn't jive with me. So if you're going to build a data center in here, I promise you, these people are going to pay property taxes on it. Like if I'm on this board, I will absolutely be voting to make certain that that happens. And if I get overruled, I get overruled. But I'm not gonna, because here's the thing: people like services, right? For the people that like government and want government to solve the problems, it takes money. All right. And if you're not collecting it from your friends, then you're not, you either don't collect it or it's all bullying. The whole thing is a bully racket right now, right versus left, trying to be more authoritarian than the other. So, anyway, I talked about this in an earlier episode about these industrial revenue bonds. Is it libertarian or not? I think I even made it a short. I might have to do it again. Senate Bill 98 doesn't lower taxes. It actually just makes the people that can't afford them get kicked out of their house, which we're going to talk about with today's meeting in another video. So I have less red tape for them written down as a con. I think there was just some slippery slope arguments about them talking about how they want the government regulating these data centers. And I just don't like government and regulation as these blanket terms that get thrown out in arguments like you won the argument because you used that phrase. It's a slippery slope that the government chooses what businesses can come here. Now, I talked about, or I think I did, yes, in another video about these data centers. Like if they consume like 90% of the electricity of the entire county, that violates an NAP. That's an aggression from a libertarian perspective, in my opinion. You can't economically do that to someone. So, the argument about utility rates I thought was important. We talked about the solar farms. Infrasound was like another kind of thing that they talked about as far as the noise pollution and migraines, as just, I don't know, these places kind of having a certain miasma effect, as it were. Um, there was definitely a little bit of argument about concerns with AI and just human beings developing and not becoming beholden to the AI. Um, it was kind of funny. Someone made an argument about asking AI to determine if it's good to build data centers, which the irony of it was like hilarious because they used that irony as justification for not building data centers. And then she's like, well, what if we just use the AI to ask us what to do about these data centers? If you can't laugh, well, how do you do? But anyway, so language was added to the meeting. Long story short, so now they have to get a CUP. Any data center has to do that, or cloud computing thingy, AI thingy. And I would agree with it. I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for listening. Until next time, bye.